Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. And I hope I can do tonight's episode justice because it is one of the most important titles, and it's a big title. You know, there's many things I'd probably want to say in this talk, which I wouldn't get to. But culture is a very interesting word. And so, if we saw culture as a program of some sorts, in some sense, how is this program programmed? By who is it programmed? And what's the result? You see, human life, for most people, they notice the free will aspect of it. Most people, because they want to be free, they want to be in control, they cover their eyes to many of the harsh realities throughout the day. And it's not just sometimes harsh realities, it is just certain levels of sensory perception that we have not articulated or even wondered about. I was saying this to someone who asked me about it, to a friend of mine recently, and I was telling him how when you see people, every person in the street, if they have something to do, just like blood moving in their veins, they have language moving in their mind. And it's not just language. For language, it's just another. it's a different state of an image. For example, you could say, uh, like, for example, there's a teacup in my hand. This teacup is like the solid state of this sort of subjectively when we look. And the reason I say subjectively is because I'm trying to say it's like the image a word represents, you know, is, for example, the image, the actual thing it represents. Reality is solid, language is liquid, consciousness is like gas. Okay, this is a very unique metaphor I tend to entertain. Culture is what you, in some sense, it's a sort of written technology. It's here before the child is born. The child opens its eyes to a world where many systems are at motion. And the thing about life is it's not just particles in motion. There's also various atmospheres where intelligence is directing particles, you know? It's like whether you call it nature or God, there's one moment here and it's moving. It seems to be alive. The gears of a changing manifest universe are turning somehow. So, anyways, the child, it opens its eyes to the world, and first it activates itself as being sight. You don't understand this. This is very subtle, but when a person reverse engineers back through their memories consciously, what they begin to realize is that many moments of their life before they had any sort of intelligent activity, they were just observing. It's as if this is a level. It's not a level. It's like the substratum of the conception. It's like free will. There was something happening before suddenly free will suddenly spontaneously appeared. Because free will gives us our sense of continuity, because we suddenly are a part of nature that became aware of itself and are like, holy shit, we die someday, and where'd we come from? It was as if like evolution is asking the next questions. You know, these questions I'm saying, like who the person is, Like right now, I find myself very strange. Like it's a very strange situation. um, I feel like a stranger in this world. At the same time, it feels like home too. You know, I feel like a stranger in my own home. And what I mean by that is that existentially, how is there a difference? Can you go to someone else and say, hey man, I exist more than you, you know, and like run away? It's like you can't do that. So on an existential level, in regards to our sensory perception, we see there's a commonality. This is why ontology doesn't get far linguistically. There's a limits to the technologies that we have ignited on this planet. It's like just like the caveman kind of took rock and wood and somehow made fire out of that by slamming them together. You know, it's like the savageness, chaoticness of the ape led to a technology. You know, it's not a normal thing to get two rocks, slam them together, and have some sort of spark hit a flame. You know, catch a flame. So it's one of those. It's a very unique situation. You know, I personally feel the caveman probably saw fire first when lightning hit a tree, and then that lightning that hit the tree, like maybe a lit branch fell, and then they took the branch. I don't think it was made like, but what I'm trying to say is, you open your eyes, dear listener, have opened in a world of incredible design. On in regards to a consideration of what is manifest, you can't judge it too much. Existentially, we're all the same. We're all existing. We're all here. The here is being us, you know? But experientially, that's where things change. You know, it's like the atoms that are composed, the particles that are composing, in some sense, me right now. Scientists suggest that this is stardust. It's like the guy went to the scientist and he's like, "What am I, scientist?" And scientist was like, "You're stars, buddy. You're stardust." You know, and so that's magnificent because the same carbon in my body is the same carbon there. It's like elementally there is an equality everywhere. Okay, not in the sense that the element is available, just the fact that the element is there. Okay, but these elements it's like these particles of stardust that have come to be me right now in this moment, they seem to abide to an intelligence. This intelligence seems at first to be just an unconscious biological program. It's as if before the program of culture you realize the program of biological existence, and believe it or not, it's a program. It's something that has design and moves forward and repeats. Okay? But in its repetition, it has variations. So some people see, when they say history repeats itself, these people look at history like a sine wave. But when you look at it in a different way, it's like a growing spiral. Do you see what I mean? There's a very unique story which has to do with one of the early moments in history where a Christian missionary, went to some Native American culture who had just like decided to, you know, speak to the Westerners and whatnot. And suddenly the missionary tells this man somehow through a translator or whatever that if he doesn't accept Jesus Christ, he will go to hell. The man says, "What is hell?" The Cherokee man says, "What is this hell?" You know? And then hell, the guy says, hell is a place of everlasting fire. If you don't have your, like, as a, you know, if you don't, in some sense, believe in Christ, you're going to go to hell, you know? And so this native Cherokee guy thinks about it and begins to, in some sense, from his own cultural program, challenge this other cultural program that is, in some sense, that has approached him. And he says, what happens to kids? This hell, like kids don't know about it when they're born. Do they go to hell? And the guy's like, nah, man, kids don't go to hell. They're so innocent, and because they don't know, why should they go to hell? And then the Cherokee guy gets mad and he says, if children don't know it and they're innocent, why did you tell me? Right? And this was the profound implication in the story, that various systems of design approach the person throughout the day. You have to kind of be very conscious, not very like just be conscious of your day, not to be defined by that which is out of your free will, in a sense, in regards to communication. It's like a situation where they take this great basketball player and they put him in a team where the whole team is against that basketball player. The whole team hates that new guy who's come there, right? And because they hate him, in some sense, the opportunities of greatness are reduced. Okay? And so that guy might suddenly stop playing, stop becoming a great footballer because the environment convinced him he cannot. Do you believe this world speaks to the person, but it speaks in a way where it's like how your memories take shape? So once we study the program of biology, we see pretty much it's like limited design. Okay? That means, like, if you listen to Noam, there's a debate between Noam Chomsky and Michel Foucault, this French philosopher, and Noam Chomsky, this incredible American philosopher. And so they have two different viewpoints in regards to the nature of kind of the progress of creativity. And Noam Chomsky saw creativity as this force, the creativity that leads towards some sort of truth, as a sort of force that is like, it's in the subconscious, it's in the brain, it's in the background, it's a background kind of source code influencing us. Pretty much the genetics of the being define its ability. And then Michel Foucault was making this point to Noam Chomsky, where he was saying, I can't even be convinced by the data because there are inhibitions, there's things blocking the way to truth in some sense. So in the analysis of what is real, man has to wonder about how his approach is real, you know? And I found myself, when I was younger, I would ignore it because I was just, my ego had sold itself to me as the ultimate. I felt I was the most important thing in the world, and just I gotta live for myself. It was kind of like most men are. I think they open in this their eyes in this world, and they just get prepared for strength training. But this strength is not a going to the gym kind of strength. It's a sort of training where it's like I'm here alone and I will march, like some sort of attitude like that. But let me tell you, the whole point what I'm getting to is that there's a biological program which has led to a sort of unique consciousness, and through the evolution and the creation of language, or one can even say the reemergence of language. Just like that saying that says, when the student is ready, the master appears. When evolution brewed existence to a certain degree, uh, the creature made its language, and its language began becoming an influence to the person, right? It's a very unique time. I believe right now, 2019 is a very incredible year. I think one of the most significant years of my life on this planet, because I am seeing the exactly, it's as if society has greater technologies, but it's coming with the opportunity cost of forgetting its nature. And the thing with progress is, eventually there will be individuals who their decisions will affect the many, whether we like it or not. It's like they have the loudest voices in society. Think of, for example, politicians. Think of, for example, professors. Think of, for example, many other people from many other categories, you know. And so what I'm trying to say is culture, some philosophers such as Terence Mckenna, they say culture is not your friend because Terence McKenna believes ideology is not your friend because ideology can entrap you. You know, that was his approach. Now, I do personally see that ideology is like a box. You know, I was telling that friend in some sense, every person alive is functioning based on a program. And what that means is a program is something where there is an inputting of values. Now, the input of the values for the person, where the program of language in some sense functions from their brain, is how they have in some sense been sculpted into an individual, into a person. And you see, you cannot say someone is a person without a mind. Have you noticed that? And what does a mind bring with it? What was the gift of the mind? Why does that word exist in the dictionary? Because it brought itself with itself a new dimension. It brought the linguistic realm. Words began in some sense being as significant as matter. That had never happened before in history. And so there is a change. There is a kind of aversion from nature, and then it's as if like we came to nature. We're like, oh man, it's too cold, and then we went to technology, and we're like, man, it's too hot, and then we come back to nature, and eventually we're finding that it's as if the place where there is the most peaceful state of mind is that moment, that position between culture and nature, where the programs of nature do not limit the cultural programs, and the culture programs of culture do not limit natural programs. I was raised like till the age of 7 in Iran, and then I moved to Canada. I lived in Canada for some time, moved back to Iran for a few years, and then came back to finally in Canada. And I could tell you is that being raised like the it's as if I see every like I in my other talks I've said it in this way: when the child is born, every moment various waves of data are hitting it. These waves of data are not just how the environment is behaving, but it also includes the intelligent factors in the environment. You know, it's as if when you're walking in a garden, you're not worried. But if you suddenly see like a bear in your garden, then it's as if there comes some concern because the expectation on how far things can change suddenly. It's all like a management of change. You see? Any person trying to attain perfection, that's their biggest opponent: time. Salvador Dali has this unique approach where he says, do not fear perfection, you will never reach it. And he drew some of the most perfectly unique artwork. And the reason is because it's all about the reference points. What we are calling normal right now is a reference point. And the species refuses to step out of ideology that are acting as boxes over people's heads. You see, this is why they say, what is the most wisest position? What is the most, what does the grand old wisdom of our era, of our time, of our existence say? And do you know what it is? Let me tell you, any person really interested, do you know what the truth of every enlightening text out there in the world is? Do you know what they're all saying? They're like stillness, silence, and that's it. In the inactivity of the biological program, the cultural program evaporates in meaning. And when the cultural program evaporates, that means what the world wants from the person no longer occupies the attention of the being that suddenly realizes a lifetime. It's like it's either the temporary is in an eternal field, or the eternal is in the temporary. It in some sense implies a stepping beyond the language threshold, a stepping beyond the dualistic cages of life. This is something true. I don't remember who said it. I think Sri Ramana Maharshi he said it. He said something like, there is a time that will come where one has to forget all they have learned. And that's because what you think you have learned, that you is a sense of self, which even on its own changes through time. Experience is ever present. What I mean by experience being ever present is that when you wonder in all the birthdays where you've blown candle cakes, and you've physically been different, even your ideology has been different, that thing that says, this is me, like, our sense of self is being preserved by the phenomena of memory, which comes down to being attention present in many ways. Another way of saying the program of culture is kind of like how nature blinded itself to see beyond itself. For me, it's shocking. If some people say, what is this life? I'll be like, it's incredibly shocking. And they'll be like, why is it shocking, man? And I'll be like, it's shocking because it is here. That's why. When you see in ancient mythology a god that was incarnated, see, they've had a sort of three dimensions of acknowledgement, okay? Kind of like this world, the world above, and the world below. The worlds below, in some sense, the notions of hell, which in some sense I think were kind of made popular by Dantes Inferno. One has to realize concepts exist only in fields of attention, and fields of attention, each person starts out as their own eyes. That's kind of all you have. All you have is what is here right now for you. And only when you can accept it and stop and constantly shaping it to judge it, when you understand, when you discover the shapeless, the attributeless qualities of life, various moments where, like a cup on a table is neither evil or good, it's just an object present. There's a sort of aroma of neutrality with the attention. For me, data is as useful as what you can make of it. And that's the kind of harsh truth of this world, that we're limited to what we have access to. There's a character in this show called Attack on Titan named Mikasa. It's a Japanese show. She has this line where she says, this world is cruel, but also very beautiful. And it was a very incredible sentence. The writers did a good job. Because nature is never one-sided. You can never win an argument without not knowing how the other is feeling. Mr. Within sees language moving in the minds of people in structured ways, and that's what a program is. It is written. It is coded. It's like something that is placed there, and we cannot avoid the unknown, which has always, for all members of various civilizations, been a very terrifying notion. You see, I'm sitting here right now trying trying to break the sky of my knowledge by challenging it. There's been times where I've gotten angry at people, and it's been an intense sort of kind of uh, focused anger. But with the same intensity, I have gotten angry at myself in ways where it's not nothing physical. Like I'm just sitting in a chair, but I'm just so angry at myself because I could not see further. You see? Behind our eyes, many people are like, there's nothing there, man. There's nothing there behind our eyes, you know? And what that means is that, of course, like when you go looking for a thought, imagine like that book Moby Dick. Like we are like those, I forget the guy's name, but like where that crew in that boat trying to like, catch this giant fish. Okay. We are trying to catch this whale from an incredible limited position. We are creatures that come and go. That means we can never call this world our home in some sense, even though we're made of it. We leave it at some point. For me, the most beautiful moments of life, if you pay attention, a vast amount of life, moments in life, all have to do with entrances and exits. You're entering new environments, or you're exiting new environments, and even internally you enter and exit various idea streams. Now the beautiful thing about language is that its architecture was incredible, you know. When I say language, guys, I change in scope of when in my speech I'm kind of like a camera lens zooming in and out of these various subjective positions that are real to me. Um, so I just want to say this, that if human beings, like, just look at this picture I've chosen. I don't know who the artist is. This was from some random site, but a society that objectively was so offended by nature that forgot its mind was natural too and entrapped itself in a mechanical technological box. You see, guys, the anger I've directed, when I was saying earlier, that sort of anger I've directed at myself had to do with an acceptance of design, with an inacceptance of design. A person gets angry when the world is not listening to their mind, is not listening to their truths. You see? When I see people getting offended, to be honest, there's never a reason for any living being to, in some sense, get angry. You can always function in a state where you realize certain inferior technologies don't need to be used. This doesn't mean you never get angry. It just means that you are conscious of the exchange of emotion. Like you do know in how many, it's an emotional thing, destruction. Nobody destroys things when they're bored. It's just too boring. But in some sense, it's an emotional amplification of an inner reality to an extent that it has started to forget the values of the outer reality. Do you know? When you go look at religions, you find something very fascinating going on. And for me, religion is It should be held in museums as one of the most unique attempts of human beings to articulate or personalize the unknown. Religion was the first attempt of our species to put a personality into the whole cosmos. And that personality in those revelatory texts was always unknown. Religion, you know why religion has stayed so long? Because it kept the unknown intelligence alive. It was a story, it was an inspiration for a story, you see? A lot of morality comes from a religious context. It doesn't mean we're not moral creatures. Of course, you don't need religion as an ideology. My whole like ultimate stance is that the program of culture is actually how language is not changing, how people's attention is not moving from the same patterns. Some people say they are an artist, some people say they're not. I've talked to people, they say they're creative, they say they're not. And I'm like, how adorable. Do we not realize every day is a new moment? Heraclitus, this Greek philosopher, has the saying where he says, no man can step in the same river twice, and it is not the same man, it is not the same river. Literally, if you put your hands back into the same river after you've put it in there once, you're going to see it's going to be a totally different atomic particles hitting your hand. In religious circles, there's this whole thing of trying to bring the person into a world of truth. And for human beings, I'm saying this because I want all children on this planet to be alert of this, that there are human beings uh, in this place called civilization and society, that their minds have attempted to see the truth of truths, the ultimate treasure, not just behind the sky that we see, but behind the skies that we don't see. These people who have attempted to see truth's face have in the process sacrificed so much that they have no other choice but to accept where they are. And what that means is that the person, through an ideology, attains a sort of integrative, unified clarity, but then instead of staying and remaining in that state, that person builds a whole, like, there's so many gurus on YouTube. I like like I went in 2000 starting from 2012 to 13 I think. I went on this massive research project to see, just personal research project, to see what the greatest story of the world is. And I realized one great story of the world one great story of the world is that it came from nothing. The other, I'll tell you, there's a few. The other great story of the world is that something, nothing came from something. Something came from nothing. One angle. Sorry about that, guys. Just coughing here. Um, it's like the human being starts from a very simple natural state of existence, and what it has so far considered to be the ultimate peak of its physical evolution has been to, in some sense, create a technological limb. You see, it's as if sometimes I wonder, like in the most luxurious, like I have the like nice headphones on and just like in front of my computer and all this, and I'm like, what technological luxury that many of like none of my ancestors had to this sophistication. I think like that, you know? And then at the same time, I'm like, wait a minute. Is it that by trying to rather naturally adapt to the world, we're using technology as a crutch, which has brought forth a slowdown of the evolution? It's as if technology is not the world. Is a like, how can I tell you? Um, a person dependent on technology in order to live, once that technology goes away, they're going to feel a total strangeness of lack of ability. When I see people getting angry, like consciousness throughout the day, what can I say? People, and it's not just, it's every living being, every Homo sapien. You start off in your own world first. What the world you see right now, you can choose to think that this is the same world that others are seeing. But fundamentally, how experience has sculpted you, has in some sense shaped you, is a totally different consideration. It's like I've lived under certain impressions that the mind moves in a linguistic reality where it is founded upon an individuality. The body moves in accordance to a collective setting. You cannot avoid your ecosystem. But when your ecosystem has also the same intelligence and there's people's minds moving out throughout the day. This is why I don't believe, in some sense we may call it a city, but it's like a concrete jungle. And the reason why we call it a concrete jungle, because the whole world is like a jungle and we've just put this concrete here. Do you see? It's as if our excuse me. It's as if our bodies were made to be on earth, but our minds were made to be beyond the sky. I don't know if it's in some of my talks I've spoken about this concept where I say it's the sky of conception. It's the edge, not the edge, but the vast view of the subjective linguistic aspects of the moment of existence. And I feel stories are being worshipped. Not the contents of the story, but the whole story is being worshipped. After there were certain people who broke the idols of man's worship, then man still after they broke his toy, like he saw God in objective phenomena. They said no, God is not an object, and then suddenly man suddenly made subjective phenomena the God, and endlessly there is this kind of attempt to conquer that which one. How can I tell you? The future is a very not dangerous, but it's like a very advanced instrument. That it's the notion of thinking about the future. I don't believe every being should sit on this earth constantly think about the future. I feel certain people should, because it's all about how you conduct the self. I've had certain moments where due to my own naivety, you know, I've naively gone to the edges of my depth. I've challenged my own philosophical constructs, and if people say, who is Mr. Within's greatest critic, I will say it is Mr. Within. I have broken the ideas that I have thought I was, and it was something where it's as if internally you have to be taught how to fight. And this is a strange concept, because the whole notion of an inner life has no value when everything has to be objective. It's like, you know how silly it is? Imagine like a king shouting at like a human being, like let's say a peasant on the street, peasant, go walk on the other side of that street. You know, I'm just trying to say, once you're done owning things in this life, you will truly look at life, and you will see it cannot be defined by a noun, and if you're wise enough, it cannot also be defined by a verb. Therefore, the unknown is fully perceived when you're more in I consider enlightenment, let's say playfully I'm saying this, enlightenment to be when the person has observed the unknown enough for their known to be enough. So you see, the issue is the future has become your boss, and the future is something where it's a moment of change, and in every moment of life things are changing. That means, trust me, tomorrow you're going to wake up as a different person, and you're going to be like, oh wow, I totally forgot about all the things, you know. It's like there's so many days that pass by. It's the nature of our mind. We don't study it because we have objective programs leading our lives. We have to immediately find a sort of resolution. So the thing is, I'm telling you, we are a natural program, our biological kind of existence. Then, in regards to the subjectivity of our experience, we are a sort of linguistic program. And when this objective and linguistic program chooses to function in a same community as other programs, then in some sense arises the cultural program. But the cultural program is not being updated by everybody, it is being updated by a few people. So the progress is slow because the value of the human being has been reduced. You see, this is the surprising thing. You know why art should be the most expensive thing in a healthy civilization? Let me tell you why. Because art is the suggestion of the depth of the evolution of the mind of the person in that instant. What I mean is, it has to do with freedom. And the issue is, none of us are free when the world has to happen in a certain way for us. This is why it's paradoxical. This is why when I honestly, like when I heard about like these people saying, yo, meditating to the ultimate enlightenment state, I was like, oh, I was like, what is that? Like I didn't even approach the thought at first because it was an action without meaning. And something can have meaning for someone else, but for you, unless you find a way to trust this world and live, you won't see. That's the issue. Now, here's the good question. Our educational systems, they are based on the linguistic program. History exists in the linguistic program. Okay? Now, culture is has to do with objective action in accordance to collective views, individual objective action in accordance to collective views. And what that means is, think of it this way. If there was a great team called humanity that had 8 billion team members who had decided, okay, it doesn't make sense to fight all the time and be animalistic all the time when we can step out into greater states of clarity. There's a notion in Buddhism which is very, like, it's an excellent idea. Um, it's these two terms. One is the Buddha and the other is a Bodhisattva. And the Buddha and Bodhisattva were both liberated beings, beings who had in some sense become free. Now pay attention because I'm saying beings, okay? I'm not telling you what kind of beings yet. There's the Buddha and then there's the Bodhisattva. Now, I want you to see that the Buddha, the word means awakened one, okay? And I think Bodhisattva probably means awakening. But or maybe Buddha consciousness, I don't know. But anyways, here, this is the notion. The Buddha is individual consciousness walking from the bottom of the mountain to the peak of the mountain where it is collective consciousness. That is the Buddhic figure, the Buddhic archetype. Then there's the Bodhisattva archetype, where the Bodhisattva archetype is very, very profound because it is from the top of the mountain coming down. So we have beings here who their existential, just the nature, if we were entertaining an incredibly Buddhist metaphysical context, the thing is, there's this notion that life is a play of forces. Now, I'm coming here in this talk saying, okay, see these forces as sort of programs. You know, there's programs of nature, the laws of nature, and then there's, in some sense, the laws of the linguistic realm. You know, how we all have a sort of common language. At least right now, it's in divided. You know, it's kind of like every culture has its own language. It brings with itself the unique ways that the human being animates itself. But the the chaotic thing about culture and patriotism and any sort of commonality of we are all one type of people is that it is in some sense a lie. Not that it's a lie. I mean, that's too bold. It's not a lie. It's just that there is so much change occurring on a microscopic level to even say that we are the same as we were another moment. It all has to do with playing with the various dimensions that reality has meaning. When the Bodhisattva came down from the mountain, it was like I'll give you an accurate example of this, which is Bodhidharma, not Bodhidharma. There was a very unique being by the name of Guru Padmasambhava, and the way he's born is very strange. He suddenly appears in a white lotus, and he's just automatically 8 years old. Okay. And he appears out of a lotus in the middle of this pond, and just the moment he steps out of this lotus, he starts enlightening the water spirits around him at the age of 8. Now the king, with his men, at that moment instantly is walking by this. And the king's like, oh my god, an enlightened kind of like, kid in a lotus enlightening water spirits, like this is next level. But it's like he adopts the kid as his son. And so instantly, from, like strange, like from it's as if this being was suddenly taken from nature back into suddenly thing like Bodhisattva. What's his name? Guru Padmasambhava. He was. It's as if he was so wise that he knew he had little time to teach, to enlighten a natural spirit before the king came and took him. Anyways, so the story goes that Bodhidharma eventually leaves. He's exiled from the kingdom. He does something messed up. And what happens is he finds himself going by a river, and this is a very profound story of Guru Padmasambhava, this Bodhisattva. Sometimes through these talks, too many ideas move through my attention, you know. Guru Padmasambhava finds himself, he's much more older now, and he finds himself walking by this river, and he's this very strange enlightened individual where he follows this, he already knows, it's like he has an intuitive GPS system or something. There's some unique stories about Guru Padmasambhava. And Guru Padmasambhava, by this river, he sees there's a princess crying, and he goes and talks to the princess and says some things, and the princess is automatically in awe, right? And suddenly there's a spy there that sees this and somehow runs to the king and like very quickly is notified, and eventually Guru Padmasambhava, he just talks to the girl there for like some time, and eventually the king's men come and take both the princess and Guru Padmasambhava. And suddenly they see in front of the town they've prepared firewood, like these like packs of fire, packs of wood, and in that firewood, and in that moment, it's like the king Guru Padmasambhava just stands there, and the girl is very smart. She already knows what's going on. and she's just shouting at her father, stop this, like some sort of madness. And the king, with avoiding his daughter's voice, suddenly in that instant goes to the king, all the people in the town who have been summoned, and he says, people of this town, know this: any person who goes near the king's daughter, this is your punishment. And in that moment, the king says, looks at Guru Padmasambhava, and Guru Padmasambhava is just looking at the girl and just smiling very simply, as if like with his eyes telling her, don't worry about anything, you know? And in that instant, what happens is, before the king tells Guru Padmasambhava walk into the flames, as if from miles, from weeks ago, Guru Padmasambhava had seen that moment, you know? And so Guru Padmasambhava goes. He goes suddenly on his own before the king tells him, and the king is kind of surprised. He's like, "This is odd," and he goes and sits in the lotus position, in this in like this meditative position, and he closes his eyes, and that's it. He sits in the middle of the firewood, and the people of the town are like, "Okay, this guy's a freak." And so what happens next is astonishing. The king gives the command, as if in that instant throwing a wave to all people of his hatred and evil. And not his evil, but his power. You see, evil is obsessed with power. That's the issue. This is why evil is so easy to control. It's where the power is. And not that where the power is, because the power, I don't want to get, like, just forget what I said. Let's follow with the story. Guru Padmasambhava, he's there in meditation. The princess in that instant sees this chaotic thing happening, and before she can tell her father who he's burning, it's as if there's this hopeless despair. It's as if it's also an enlightening moment for the princess in that situation. And the princess sees the sort of madness and blindness of sort of patriarchal intentions. Now, the flames are burning. The townspeople are shouting, "Yeah, burn, burn, man, yeah. We don't know why you're there, but burn." That's the madness of society, the mob, the blind mob, you say. It is blind because there's no way that many groups of people can all comprehend the same directions given to the mob, you know, in the same way. But anyways, so what happens is the mob is shouting. The mob is shouting very savagely, and their flames are burning. But suddenly, as like the first hour goes by, the flames are becoming less, are becoming less, are becoming less, and people are like, "Holy shit, this is insane!" And they're looking, and suddenly they see something next level, and they're like, "Oh my god!" And Guru Padmasambhava is there as if the fire never touched him. And the flames burn, and the people's shouting and savageness suddenly dies down, and it becomes like, oh my god, and there's gasps being heard, like, explosions of disbelief, And so, Guru Padmasambhava, after all the flames have ended, after the anger in that whole moment was purified, you know, Guru Padmasambhava stands up. He smiles. The people are all shocked. The king is shocked. The princess is, in some sense, just like also shocked. And Guru Padmasambhava stands as if the world is continuing. And so, believe it or not, I'm not making this part up. Like the guy, the king in the story, in this very important kind of mythological level story, the king sees this man and realizes there's more to the world than the crown. and he asked the guy to marry his daughter, you know. And Guru Padmasambhava, as if he's seen ahead, already knows, and he says yes. And for me, of course, guys, I'm giggling now, but I am respectfully sharing this idea because it is a very incredible notion. And I was like very uniquely when I heard this, I'm like, okay. And I remember I was going to university in UK, Birmingham, and I would go sit in the middle of a yard where so many people would pass intentionally. I would go sit there. It had a grass area, you know, where it was a busy place. So I would go sit there and I would sit in a meditative pose, close my eyes, and I would just sit there. It was kind of like strangely a social experiment at the same time, me just sitting there, and I'm like, okay, let me just be still and silent here and see what happens. Okay? And in that moment, it would be very unique. It's as if I would sometimes feel like there's a lot of people looking at me. Then I would feel like and my eyes were closed the whole time when I was sitting there. So I sat eyes closed and I'm like, okay, I'm going to trust the world for the next 20 minutes, you know? And so I just sat there. And I remember when I went back, it's like a few of my friends saw me and they all came and acknowledged me about it, you know? They asked me, what were you doing, you know? And you know, it was a very unique kind of situation. I was kind of trying to see how far I would burn in sort of a social disobedience. And a social disobedience because society gets its meaning of normality from what it is obeying. You see, the slave has no choice to, in some sense, be its destiny is left to the destiny of the master. And what that means is the ideology that influences the individual defines the person, you know, defines the world. Hey guys, I was interrupted. Anyways, I feel just like how the world has an access, words like language has an access to, any sort of story of the world has an access to. This access is centering around the sensory data of a receiver. It's as if sensory perception is being you right now, you know? Your mind is being the moment. So, again, from the unconscious movement of nature, we evolved into a movement of nature that is conscious of itself. Now, after a creature became conscious of itself, it in some sense existed to itself in two ways. It existed as literally what's physically here, but it also existed to itself as a sort of singular subjective in a singular subjectively real way, where the person became a thought. After the person became a thought, he realized in the linguistic reality, new concepts can arise all the time. What that means is the world began being built behind our eyes. These talks, to be honest, are all like they're inspired by this principle I acknowledge. And it's kind of the principle of honoring the unknown. What that means is many people are afraid of what they don't know. Usually they don't tell you this. If you're street smart, whenever you're afraid of something, you go handle the problem instantly. Where's the world kept? How is it all here? Questions that bring a sort of strange fear in the sense of trying to contemplate that which is empty. This is why I think Zen masters kind of like drink tea when they contemplate emptiness. Because what is hot once gets cold soon. What is alive in a certain way, eventually the intensities of life change. I see myself like kind of in my mind how I would run 5 years ago, and now I have a different capacity for it. And so reality changes you as you change with it. And kind of this life is like you got to be conscious that it's not just happening to you, you're happening to it too, which implies that the values and the meanings and the subtext and all the context you see to any sort of conception, it is all you. How you wield your attention throughout the day. You see, they said the weapon evolved. Like the weapons were first kind of like metals held in people's hands, right? Then the true weapon though at war was the mind. And the mind is something where once global war stops, people just are like, okay, this is a stupid game. Let's stop throwing metal at high speeds at one another. We must care for our world in order to change it. And it doesn't really have an owner. You cannot own a universe. You are pretty much owned by the universal sector. You are based on the laws of nature. And the laws of nature have become conscious of themselves and have in some sense animated with an infinite urge. I was like, what is this evolution? When I heard the idea of evolution, it was like divine, it was like poetry for eternity for me. Let me tell you why. Because it was like the eternal urge for a creature to continue. Survival means you want to continue still in manifestation in this world, in this life. That which is behind your eyes has not given up on that which is in front of your eyes. You still want to live. And living is not just like you being in a sort of condition. It is realizing that we are all empty handed when it comes to the unknown, when it comes to that which is beyond our sight. It doesn't matter whether you are in a palace or you are on the streets. It doesn't matter if you, uh, you know, are a scholar or you're a fool. We are all. It's as if like this is the ultimate archetype that just is in the background of every conceivable phenomena. Your body is made of earth, your mind is made of sky. The program of culture implies how senses of self are being molded throughout in civilization. When I use the word civilization, it means the all societies being considered as one phenomenon, not as one. Yeah, as one phenomenon, I could say. Attention is something that really can't be governed if it has a natural origin. You cannot control nature. The king could go shout at a lion like, "Hey lion, I'm a king. Don't you dare kill your king." And the lion doesn't even have the intellect, like the intelligence, it just eats the king. The world owes you nothing. It has given you your one gift, and it's like, here, you exist in this way. Go do something about it. You know? The child's mind starts off in a mode of dependence. It depends on its environment to exist. But as it develops a sort of individual identity, a sort of fixed identity, that means begins to trust reality through various thought lenses, then the being, in some sense, the child moves from a state of dependence into a state where they're beginning to accept that the burden of the world, it's not just Atlas that is carrying the weight of the world, it's every living being. And so the cycle repeats every day. Ooh. The inconceivable is very complex to conceptualize. Uh, we must free direct experience from linguistic chains. We are changing species. That means our true nature is not the content of the manifest universe change moving around. It is the change being there. It's as if like there was a time where I'm like, oh my God, what should I do? Should I go do, like I was trying to, I had a very kind of complex, not complex, but like kind of uh, unavoidable relationship with this notion of what should the success of conscious, survival and existence be, you know? And my future was challenging me to see how far the present could go. Your attention moves in accordance to the world witnessed. And it's kind of like Michelangelo has this quote where he says, I saw the angel in the stone and I set it free. And what he's saying there is that there is a sort of inner urge to gratify, to try to be the best one can be in this existential opportunity. But but at the same time, in attempting to being the best, there comes the avoidance of the bigger picture. And so the thing is, sometimes it's okay not to tell children the bigger picture because it'll be too much of a burden, you know. But it's kind of like all human beings on their back, they have this giant boulder. Somehow they're all uh, like carrying this giant boulder. And the children who are born are not carrying it, but eventually they are being raised to eventually go into the system of life and experience suffering in accordance to the various values they keep. These values become the cultural program, the linguistic program, the various programs, the various ways the mind spreads itself out in the moment, conceptually. And it all has to do with navigation. And we have thought the responsibility to be only left to sort of an unconscious. It's like what you don't know can't kill you, or some notion like that. or what doesn't kill you make you stronger. Like that's great. Friedrich Nietzsche said that, by the way. uh, and what he meant, oh, I think I'll stop the talk here, guys. My attention is truly really moving internally. So I'll kind of say this, that everything in this life comes down to the story you're telling yourself and how much further than that story you can see yourself. You know, there's some stories I wished when I was younger people had told me. You know, it's like I would avoid like certain dangerous parts of this kind of uh, this jungle we call the world. We have to free the mind of the species by allowing it not to constantly worship ideas. Ideas don't define the person, the attention animates it. The Yoga Patanjali Sutras say your consciousness is like a glass orb. Like this glass orb is moving through various colored surfaces. It takes the color, but it is not the color. You see, it's like you have a new birthday every year, but you're not the same you, even though a part of you which stands in your memory acknowledges you as the same you. So you see, it has to do with the attention. You are a kind of viewer of your own life. It's not just like you're a viewer of this talk. Every moment of your life, you're viewing the self that is here, and your attention holds it in whatever light you see. You know, I have a very interesting talk called Wisdom of the Hidden Pillar. I gave it a while ago, and like a long while ago. And this wisdom of the hidden pillar, one of the early sentences that you hear in it is that I'm saying like light is like a pillar of sight for your eyes, you know? And how, in some sense, we are really creatures that are light based, because without light, we had nothing to talk about. So that's what I'm saying. We are dependent on light. So the ancient Egyptians saw this and they were like, holy shit, let's worship this. And so they started worshiping the sun, right? And I could totally see the metaphysical kind of philosophies of the ancient Egyptians, circling around if the moon was the sun that had returned in a different form, or if it was a totally different moon. Like I could totally see the philosophical attempts there. But the whole notion was they were worshiping light, and we don't worship light. Like we don't see anybody worshiping light. It's like, what's your god? My god is light. It's like, what do you mean your god is light? Like covered in light? It's like, no, my god is actually light. It's like, what do you mean light? Photons? And the guy's like, yeah. A scientist probably look at ancient Egyptians like, these poor souls are worshiping photons. I joke around, but there was a sophistication there in ancient Egyptian thought that the sun was the source of reality. Now, I do see evolution as something that occurring on the earth, but this earth has been constantly being beamed by the sun. So I find what the intelligence of the human being is perhaps light. Light is energy, and its energy has with itself a sort of memory, a sort of uniqueness of a design. That means it's not like the person in a new age way. It's like, oh my God, I see light around the person, auras of light. I don't, Mr. Within doesn't, I mean, I don't deny that thing. Like my brother, for example, he sees auras, you know? And I don't refuse it, but I could totally see how it could be misleading because my mind doesn't associate it. It's like there's a battle between the logic and rationality of memory with the imagination and innovation, with the innovation of the imagination. It's as if there's a sort of one side of your brain hemisphere is like roaring at your whole existence, march into the unknown, explore, be creative, da 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 da. And then there's another part of your other brain hemisphere is like, no, maintain, reserve, hold the shield. A part of your brain holds the sword, another part of your brain hemisphere holds the shield in some sense, in regards to the conservative and liberal aspects of it, in regards to how much there is freedom and how much there is not. You see, a society thrives in accordance to its definition of freedom. If freedom is selfish, the society is too animalistic to evolve into higher depths, into higher dimensions. Honestly, you don't know this, but it's like we as a species got out of the food chain and built like these sophisticated cities we live in. However, at the same time, the battle between man's nature, it's as if it's like a battle between free will trying to say I am God, and then the natural world and everything else outside of that free will being like, no, I am, you know. For me, language's utility is it opened a multidimensional context. If somebody says what's the earliest language, if they ask Mr. Within, I would say it is numeracy. It is in some sense mathematical language. It was the acknowledgement of singular objects rather than there just being only one phenomenon. So let's entertain a sort of scientific notion that something came from nothing. Okay? So first there's nothing. Then we say something appears. Okay? When the moment something appears, there is the number one. Now this something was just one thing, but then it broke apart. It's like from the trunk of the tree, it branched out. Okay? Suddenly, many galaxies and universes popped out of nowhere. You know? The universe began kind of in a unique cylindrical way cooling in accordance to history. Clarity resides in the heart of the unbreakable. What do we do with all these programs that some of it we have our free will has control over, some of it not? For example, your free will has control over your biological program to some degree. You can't choose your face, like how your face looks like, but you can choose the facial expression. And that facial expression is being directed by your sense of identity. And your sense of identity is being directed by how you, as an intelligent moment, have interpreted a sense of self and the sense of other. How you have wondered about who you are and in what context of freedom you have breathed in. You know, there's a sort of battlefield kind of dynamic to this. It's like there's no longer rich or poor, there's no longer classifications, you know. The reason is because it's as if like if you've seen the movie Enemy at the Gates, There's that scene where Russian soldiers are being thrown into the battlefield, are being like directed to the battlefield, and some of them, it's as if they don't have enough weapons, so they give one person a gun, and then they give the other people like bullets. Do you see? And so the whole story is there's this sniper, this gifted rifleman, you know, who suddenly he's, instead of being given a gun, he's unlucky, he just gets bullets, and they are just thrown, these soldiers run back, and these soldiers are thrown into in some sort of hell where if they retreat, the Russian military would kill them. You know, their own, like, Russia military is like, we don't accept traitors to come back, so they would kill their own men to just say that you have only one thing you can do here, just charge, right? And so it's as if, like, when there's no way back home, the person has to, in some sense, their attention has to reside somewhere. If the person thinks they've done so many bad things that they can never be good, so their attention, if it's denied, if it's freedom, it will choose to be remain enslaved. The issue is not the idea of hell. The issue is the idea's existence in the attention of people and its continuity. And what kind of thought structures are we walking in? How should the world be truly kept in the attention of the civilization? It's a fascinating place. You know, it all, to be honest, a lot of what we think is knowledge, the very, like, let me tell you what it is. It is just various levels of concentration. When you go see a professor, you talk to a professor at an educational institution, the professor has an acknowledgement of very deep notions of the origin of that field of study they're teaching. You see, they have climbed that far into the ideology. However, the thing is, we are teaching in a world we don't understand. And so what is being taught is becoming a burden for the educational system, because the person's like, what do you want us to teach you? You're deciding what you want, like, you know? So it's one of those situations where it's a sort of, educational systems have become businesses, or they were from the start businesses, I don't know. But it's very strange. Knowledge is being possessed by economical factors which ignore the true value of knowing. You know, not want, like, the exploration of wanting to know things is something where it cannot be monetized. Knowledge is too important than money. Unfortunately, that's the situation. It's not like I'm just saying that to you know, provoke goodness in the world. I'm honestly saying it's like we need to realize that in a temporary life, every moment is an eternal effort. It's like this was the greatest Rubik's Cube of all time to solve. What the hell is existence doing? It's like, it's like, what is this world doing right now? The whole thing, you know? Like, aside from the various ways it can be divided up into having meaning, it's like, what is this whole thing doing? And existence doesn't need an explanation. If you take the notion of time away, the person can no longer be stressed or angry. It's very strange because they have no reference, you know? Something strange that my father came back from Iran to Canada, and he told me that my grandmother, she's very old. I think she's reaching her 90s, and she losing her memory. And so, because she's lost her memory, she used to be this grumpy lady at times, and so now she has become an incredibly nice person because she doesn't have the reference of what that object or phenomena in some sense implies. So many of us don't even care about our memories. You see, we don't even care about how data is held. We are just like, okay, let me go get some, like, food to eat. So we're so objectively oriented that we have ignored the internal. And because we have ignored the internal, educational systems have denied the greater explorations of the children of humanity. The system is flawed. And it's not flawed because it is wrong. We're not saying it's wrong. We're just saying something better can come. You see, we're not like the Inquisition. You see, it's as if the symbiosis between the governmental kind of position and the citizens' position is a very unique kind of relationship. It's a symbiosis. It is a symbiosis with a system, even though that system is run by people, you know. The notion is that it's a system. It's this collective, it's like a law. It's something huge that it's like part of the field of our subjectivity that we exist in. Again, just like how a camera can zoom in and zoom out, the person can really suddenly just come to stillness. It has to do a lot with movement. I'll tell you something mind-blowing, and I don't know if places have done research or anywhere any institution has done research, but this shocked me. I sat down and I was there and I closed my eyes and I became very still and silent. I was in my room and I was just checking this out. And I closed my eyes and in my mind I just started to speak as if like I'm speaking with my mouth closed, okay? I began suddenly, slowly lowering my pitch as I'm speaking, mouth closed, and eventually reaching a sort of silence. But then, in that silence, what I thought was silence, I began to see I have thoughts. You see, I saw that I have thoughts in some sense, right? It was like, how can I tell you? It's as if language, like right now, what I'm telling you, all these words that you're hearing behind my eyes, there is a sort of imagery. There's something there. There's a sort of subjective structure and layout that there. It's like every being has a sort of blueprint to how their intelligence animates. But again, it has to do with how much the attention chooses subjectivity to be there. Leonardo da Vinci, he says simplicity is the most ultimate sophistication because the complex arises from that which is simple. And the most simplest view was the recognition of that what is being observed does not need to be. Like the observer, you don't have to be defined endlessly in this life by external conditions only. The free will is using this physical, this biological life as a sort of cocoon to, in some sense, it's a kind of drop falling into an ocean kind of dynamic, that when the moment the drop falls into the ocean, the moment the individual reality in some senses breaks apart, and in that moment it is also re-emerging. It's as if the drop is no longer the drop. It has chaotically died to, in some sense, the unity of all phenomena, you see. So language is a luxury. Anyways, guys, it's what time is it? Oh my God, it's 4 a.m. So thanks for listening, guys. Um, I choose to use these Mr. Within talks as kind of like a digital notepad. I'm not per se saying everything I'm saying here. I'm not just saying it to people. I'm kind of just these are thoughts that I tend to want to record, or moments where I feel certain viewpoints of my own. Like I'm creating a journal of my own sight through various moments of my life. The eyes open, the world opens. The eyes close, the world remains open. That is the power of intelligence. There is something on this rock. It's not just the rock. There is something here. Just the nature of the design, kind of like as if there's a sort of, again, like I'll use the word blueprint. Think of it as if there is a very unique way that what is real is being real objectively. When we study it, it all comes down to a sort of language sphere. It's as if the subjective realm has to chaotically, till the end of time, avoid the objective truth. You know, it doesn't matter if it's in a religious context. Let me tell you why. Because the objective truth can dismantle the various contexts of that are keeping that sort of subjective reality alive, that subjective identity. How your attention embraces the world will define you. The program of culture, the limits of language, the energy of the moment. I will leave you with the words of Dylan Thomas. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light.